Coast Director here at Zynga. I lead West Coast ad sales. For those of you who aren't familiar with Zynga, we're the leading mobile game publisher in the US with 30 million players in the US, 150 million worldwide, spending about 10 hours a month engaging with our games. We publish over 50 games, including Words with Friends, Zynga Poker, CSR Racing, and from our hyper casual division, the #1 game in the App Store in Q1, High Heels. These games are all free to play. So feel free to visit your favorite app store and download and enjoy and invite some friends. So with that, Michael, good to see you again. Thanks for joining. Just quickly wanted to kind of review kind of our agenda for today, and then we'll kind of get into it. So as we talked about, I think we'll spend a little bit of time talking about kind of your journey to Paramount Plus, kind of where you guys fit into the ever more crowded streaming space, kind of where you see the future of streaming headed, and then talk about kind of pivot a little bit and talk about some of the changes that's coming down the pipeline with data privacy, cookieless world, all that good stuff, and then get out our crystal ball and talk a little bit about new innovations and what we see coming down the pipeline. So with that, would love it if you could just introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and what led you to Paramount Plus.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hope everyone's digging SpongeBob here. I know I was supposed to put a different background on, but I had to represent the content and IP portfolio over at ViacomCBS. So Mike Ribero, VP of Global Marketing for Paramount Plus. How did I get to Paramount Plus? I think it's a great question. I wish I was one of these people that like had a plan. I basically didn't say no to really good opportunities. There was no rhyme or reason, and it sort of worked out that way. But I think, thematically, at least what I tell people, looking in hindsight, is I've kind of always been on the edge of helping established enterprises think about the next phase of growth. So at Visa with digital wallets, at Dish with Sling TV, the first live OTT provider, and now at Paramount Plus, so it's ViacomCBS's first direct-to-consumer, main direct-to-consumer offering. Wow.
It's interesting. So yeah, I mean, you got an interesting background, certainly coming from more of, like the tech facilitators to a giant content publisher, right? I mean, Paramount Plus, looks like you guys launched just over a month ago now. March 4th was the launch in US, Canada, several Latin American countries. I mean, I love that sitting on the mount of content, right? 30,000 TV episodes, including live sports and news, a giant library of movies, 2,500 movies, and several subscription tiers. How did you take your experiences from the kind of the tech enablers like Sling and the digital wallet, and then come to apply that for a giant content publisher?
Yeah, I think, really in three main ways. So the first is really thinking about moving, from a messaging perspective, moving from what to why. So I think a lot of times tech companies want to just be like, hey, we're the, the coolest new thing. We have check out all these, different features. I sort of looked to Apple in the way that they did, the iPod. I know it's an overused example, but they essentially sort of focused on the benefit instead of just like what it was. And so I've learned the hard way. We did at Sling. We sort of said we were, just over the top television, and people should just come, running to us. It didn't turn out that way. I think we, tweaked the message, and towards the end of my stint there, we're able to find a groove. I think sort of in that same phase with Paramount Plus, we've launched, seeing good awareness and understanding, but now, we have to answer the question for consumers, like, why do you need another streaming service? A lot of people have 1, 2, 3, 4 streaming services. And so it's going to be a focus you're going to see on us that we do in the future. You're going to hear me. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to marketing and going back to the basics in old school. I will say one tactic that I'm pulling over to Paramount Plus from Sling and from the finance world is direct mail. I love it.
I just saw on the saw on the last that he was talking about subscribing to newspapers. So look at I love some of the tried and true things coming back.
It's great. And I think like, especially, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, but like when you know who you're going after, and we have a ton of first party data, since we have a direct relationship with the consumer, you can very clearly see who your good customers are, who they aren't. And so, all of the things that, you don't have to worry about viewability, and like, don't get me wrong, that stuff's important part of the mix, but thinking about, direct mail as a channel. And then, lastly, I'd say like just being maniacal about measurement. And I know measurement can mean a lot of different things, but to me, the biggest thing is making sure you have stakeholders, executive leadership, and really finance kind of buying into your measurement. Once you kind of have them on board, decisions become a lot easier. You're not, really arguing about methodology, but strategy. And I think that's a much better place to be. So, those, messaging, a certain tactic in direct mail, and stakeholder management and measurement is critically important.
Yeah, lots of things to always juggle, right? From finance to management. I know you guys are obviously new to the market, 30 days in, and one of the kind of key kind of pillars you guys have is the different subscription tiers.
Yeah,
it's like there's a limited commercial and a commercial free. Can you share a little bit about how you guys landed on that, and what you're seeing about how it's working so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paramount Plus, we're part of a broader streaming ecosystem that within ViacomCBS, and so I think the strategy is pretty clear, kind of like good, better, best type of approach. So on the we have Pluto is a sister company, and so they are a fast service or AVOD, but essentially offering the service completely for free. Paramount Plus is kind of that like mass product, and we have two different tiers within Paramount Plus, a lower price tier and a higher price tier. Really thinking about mass demand for the lower price, and then kind of call it mass premium. To like borrow from the credit card industry for that higher price tier, and then Showtime really being that premium type of product for us. And I think with that approach, we feel really comfortable that we sort of can address every single part of the market with just different products. I think the other thing that we sort of realize is Paramount Plus is not going to be the only streaming service that people have in their ecosystem or in their portfolio. And really, being we were CBS All Access and now Paramount Plus, that the kind of 1 and 2 slots for people are typically Netflix and Amazon Prime, or Netflix and Hulu, that we really want to be that third or fourth option, and be very highly complementary to the things that customers want to see that they can't get on a Netflix or a Hulu. And then lastly, I think if you look at the streaming competitive set, we have a $5.99. It's going to go to $4.99 in the summer, but like that's a really attractive price for the and a really attractive value for the consumer. And so whether it's adding on or upgrading to the $10, I think we feel really confident that being able to provide the catalog of content that we have, very powerful, iconic brands like Nick, at a really compelling price. We're hoping that motivates people and that helps drive volume for us.
Yeah, and I certainly, talking about content, you got obviously such a great kind of diverse portfolio. All of the kids content with Nick,
Yeah.
certainly there he is in your background. With also the Paramount, all the feature films, and then it sounds like you guys have got a pretty robust pipeline of new content coming. It's interesting that you launched on the back of CBS All Access too, right? So you had a pretty good going brand there with CBS All Access, and then you kind of pivoted it and rolled that up into Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
How was it introducing? You've got such a nice portfolio of content. How is it telling the CBS All Access people like, okay, here's your it's turning into Paramount Plus? Was there positive, negative reaction to that? What was the feeling from your customers?
Yeah, I think overall very positive. We started, and so this happened back in the fall, where all of a sudden we started adding more and more content from the Viacom portfolio into CBS All Access, so that Nick and BET, that content was available. So people kind of got a taste of it early on, and it gave us a really good foundation, because we have first party data and what people sign up, what they watch when they first sign up, what do they spend a lot of time watching, what kind of keeps them watching. I think that really helped us inform when we went to market as Paramount Plus, what sort of shows we were going to feature, what sort of segments we wanted to go after. So a really good foundation. I'd say, CBS, more kind of strategically, CBS, it was definitely, I think, a little limiting in just like the broad appeal. The intent with Paramount Plus was really to be a global platform, and the team did a ton of research into, what was that right global name and identity that could propel this service forward. Also sort of very quickly established with consumers just the breadth of the portfolio, and really have all of those sub brands properly represent them. So that was really thinking there. Honestly, I'd say consumers don't care a ton. Like they just want to, they want a name, they want to know what to call it. And so at the end of the day, I think like we tried to sort of minimize the gap into what they had and what we were going to give them. Of course, we were there and we communicated with an email, and we're there for customer support. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like they want the service, and the name. I think us as marketers, we went into all this research, and we stressed out that we picked the right name, and then they're like, okay, great. Paramount Plus sounds great.
I was honestly surprised that you guys landed on Paramount Plus with so many iconic brands in your portfolio, from Comedy Central to VH1 and MTV, and Viacom is the corporate company, and CBS, and I was and so it's interesting to hear that consumers didn't really care. Like they were like, hey, I love all this content, I'm happy with the price point. Interesting. The other part of the division, obviously, too, is the theatrical division, right? And all the feature length films, and if you look at all the different studios and kind of with movie theaters opening back up and all that stuff, it seems like some people like Warner Brothers are releasing content directly in theater as well as on the platform simultaneously. Disney Plus, they're trying different things. It seems like they're testing certain ones as like a premium option, and some are available to all subscribers. You guys have gone with the 45-day delay. I'm not sure if you guys have, I guess SpongeBob was the first movie to come out on the platform. What was that decision like?
I think it was easier, a little bit in the time of COVID, just because theaters weren't open. And so that drove a lot of the decision making around launch. I think, we still believe there's room for both. And I think, as the world changes, as we, return to or sort of emerge out of this pandemic, I think there's going to be an appetite, and some people are going to want to go back in the theater, some are not. And I think we want to set up a platform that can support both. And so yeah, I think the 45-day window, the shortened window, is going to be really interesting and exciting. It's coming up here. You're going to hear announcements from us over the summer, and so we're really excited. And I think again, ultimately, we think it can live in both worlds. It doesn't have to be an either or. It can be an and type of answer.
Right. Yeah. That seems to be the answer for everybody. Is consumers want the and, right? They want to have their cake and eat it too, and we want to give them that value and keep them coming back. It's interesting is there's to your point, there's the big three, and then there's also now Discovery Plus and Paramount Plus and Peacock, and the market seems to be adding a new player all the time, right? So curious to see how now that every basically entertainment conglomerate has launched a new streaming service, how do you foresee the next few years playing out for Paramount Plus?
I'd say, more generally, I wish I knew more generally. I'm definitely not smart enough. I would say, I would encourage people to read. And in particular, I think there's a lot of really good people who cover, content more generally, but, two that I really like. they're a research firm, Moffett Nathanson, and then a guy named Matt Ball on Twitter, like awesome insights into where OTT is going. For us, I think we're focused on growth. We really want to be that, viable option that's going to supplement, again, I don't think anyone is going to displace Netflix anytime soon. But we think we can be a really nice complement in terms of, being able to offer live, whether it's soccer or the NFL or your local news station. It's something Netflix doesn't have, and we can do so at a very competitive price. So I think, scaling in the US is priority A, and then continuing to expand, globally. As you mentioned, so in LATAM, Canada, and Australia right now, but more geographies are coming. And I think, we're going to see a lot of focus in the out years of making sure we can grow internationally. Again, not terribly unlike the path that Netflix has already walked.
Yeah, and obviously you've got this whole linear side of your business too, which you've got to like kind of keep an eye out. But you mentioned some of the live stuff. I watched the Masters this weekend on Paramount, right? And it was kind of cool because there's different. You weren't just watching the leaders. You had the option of camping out in a certain hole, like you're sitting at the Masters, right? Here's Amen Corner or whatever. And so I thought that was a really nice experience, and I love the fact that you're able to get into, the local news and all that good stuff.
I think, that's definitely, I'm glad you highlighted it. I think it's interesting. I don't know if you saw the AFC championship game that with Nick did. But they essentially, they had like when someone went into the end zone, all this like goo fell on them.
Oh
So it's just, I think it's cool, and it, gives us another platform to start, to push the boundaries on the broadcast. And I think that's really exciting, especially, as like, how do you get a younger demo interested in golf? Like maybe we're going to be willing to take some of those risks. Maybe not. Maybe golf's not the right sport.
Yes,
but football.
That'll be an interesting tie-up. That's funny. Well, yeah, it sounds like there's, lots of opportunity and lots of runway. You certainly have the content to back you guys up. And so I wanted to just kind of quickly pivot into the kind of the next phase of our conversation. And obviously so much news now, and you've brought this up a few times around your first party data, but, with the deprecation of cookies and device identifiers, obviously you're talking about scale, and as a VP of marketing, your job is to attract new users at the end of the day, new subscribers. So wondering how this, these changes like, iOS 14.5 is coming down any minute now, imminently, right? And obviously cookies are a little bit further out, but how is all of these changes impacting your guys' ability to find the audience that you want to find and grow and scale your business?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, and this goes back to me mentioning I'm a bit of like a curmudgeon here. I love it. I think, too often, I think it's going to force marketing and media people to be more thoughtful. And I'm really excited about that. Like, I believe in formal training and education and understanding like all the marketing frameworks. I know some people think they're out of date, but to me, like getting back to the basics of segmentation, targeting, positioning, like where do you hit someone, I think is really exciting. I'd say I'm also excited just because, in some of the places I've been, it feels like complexity and maybe kind of complexity tied to, hey, we're doing this really complex bidding, and the Wall Street traders do this, sort of mass like effectiveness. And I know in some of the experiments we've run and we've tried to scale, programmatic, it hasn't scaled in the way that I think I would have liked to see. Add in some of the fraud issues and all of that. So I'm excited about it because I think like good publishers, we've talked to like New York Times, like we're really excited about being able to do things with really good publishers, invest, knowing that they have kind of their own first party data, and we're going to get quality outcomes from them.
Yeah.
And I guess the only. Go for it.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, it really is so important. This first party data and having the publisher and the advertiser become closer together in this chain. And there's so much middlemen. Just is this impacting your guys? It sounds like you have this first a ton of data, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes data is good and it's overwhelming if you don't have the right teams. But are these changes impacting your guys's your analytics or your measurement or your attribution how is that impacting these changes, and how are you preparing for these changes?
Yeah, so not a ton to date. I'd say like first problem is admit you have a problem, and I think like we're starting to think about it. And anyone out there who's not starting to think about it, I would start to think about it.
Yeah.
I would say it's helping. We're at a place where I'd say new brand just launching. Main goal is really like driving awareness and consideration. Yes, of course we want starts, but or people signing up for the service, but absent kind of awareness and consideration, we're probably going to be nowhere. So, we haven't sort of like fought that issue yet, but I know we're going to. I'd say, things that at least I'm personally thinking about. One, I'm going to go back to the direct mail. We're working with a company now called Posty, but it's essentially like providing on-demand direct mail. And we have a lot of people who've done programmatic and done social and sort of get that, and so they provide us essentially like that sort of interface, but then we can, the product is a physical mailing versus a digital ad. And I think that sort of like bringing the new to the old is really
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Yeah.
The second is essentially like finding new companies and different ways to obtain data. There's a cool company out there called Reach that I've been working with, and the proposition is they're going to pay consumers for data. They're going to take the what's going on in quote unquote the surveillance marketing, and they're going to bring it to the forefront. And I think that's really intriguing. Essentially now customers have control and permission over the data that they want to share, and they're going to be compensated for it. And I think that sort of like new paradigm opens up a whole lot of new avenues that maybe we haven't thought about in the past. And so I'm excited to sort of see how that ultimately unfolds.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I love the conversation around some of these other companies, and it's going to be interesting to see how these new data partnerships or lack thereof or impacts the way you guys go to market. Maybe it's going more contextual, maybe it's buying more television, going back to print. People are still subscribing, right? Is this impacting any of your media spend or budgets or media mix allocation? Obviously the upfront is coming down right now, so that's another side of your guys' business, right? But is all this impacting the way you guys develop your media mix?
Not at the time, but we're thinking about it. And I think one dimension that we want to think about too is being not only the right customer, and I think like all the programmatic helped you get in front of the right customer. We want to think about like the right time too. So things I saw at Sling that we're trying to bring over to Paramount Plus is like anytime someone sort of had a big life moment, it caused them to sort of reconsider their entertainment package. You move houses, you have a baby, a kid leaves for college. All of a sudden, it's like, do I still need everything I need? So that door is open, and so we're trying to be thoughtful about knowing that's the moment we want to be in front of someone. How do we get there? So I'd say that's kind of a key dimension that we're trying to think about differently, and where we're evolving, and using partners who can kind of help us get there.
Interesting. All right. Well, listen, I'd love to kind of pivot into our last third of our. I think we've got another 6 minutes or so of time here before Q&A. So we'd love to have you get out your crystal ball, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this is the future of media, right? So we'd love to talk a little bit about kind of what are some technologies that you're either personally or professionally interested in. Obviously. Everything kind of everybody hopefully has a little bit of a test and learn budget, right?
Yeah.
And so are there anything that you guys are or like you're using as a consumer? I know a lot of people in our business are all about Clubhouse and in audio. Is there anything that off the top of your head that you want to mention?
Yeah, I think things that sort of stick out for me, and again, like really dependent on what we're trying to do as a brand, who we're trying to go after. I'm going to say it, TikTok. I've found myself in, personally in the pandemic, like I spend way too much time than I should for the age that I am. But I think it's great. And I think we were able to experiment with the platform at Sling, and had really, success targeting a younger market. And, I think it was brought up on the last panel too, about the one thing we did, which I'm really happy we've done, and I've now learned kind of doing it both ways, is doing creative that's endemic to the platform. So I swear it was our social media manager. He did a TikTok in literally 15 minutes, uploaded it, and it was exceeded sort of the benchmarks that they had. It did great for us, but fast forward, we did it more in a more polished video too, and it didn't do nearly as well. And so I was just I know it's a no duh moment, but it was just eye opening for us of how to do it right. And the sort of results follow. The other thing I'd say is, at least in my ecosystem, the voice world, really
Yeah.
Alexa,
Yeah.
is really interesting. And I'd say a little scary for us. So Amazon's a partner. We show up on the Fire TV, but I think when you get into a world where a consumer says, I want to watch X, Y, or Z, how do we ultimately show up? How do we do so in a meaningful way? Is Amazon going to prioritize their own content over ours, and how we do that? So, having them as sort of a gatekeeper, I think can be really great and really, terrifying all at the same time. And then lastly, and Brett, I'm going to put you on the spot here, but AR and VR seems really intriguing. I don't know how it ultimately materializes in our ecosystem. I know when I was at Sling, we had a partnership with Oculus, and you could watch on the Oculus, but I read a stat the other day that there's 10,000 people at Facebook working on AR and VR. And I was like, oh my goodness, when they throw 10,000 really smart people at a problem like that, you bet something's going to come out of it. So I don't know, how are you seeing that, the same or different in the gaming world?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to just like you guys, to provide our content wherever somebody wants to engage with it, right? So we're testing, we've got games on Alexa where people can play Words of Friends on Alexa, and we're launching games on Nintendo Switch. Right now, primarily our games are in-app, but certainly we're looking and testing AR and VR and how all that works. I actually saw a post from Zuckerberg today saying, that while gaming is right now the biggest use case for the VR, more B2B type of stuff is coming on board, team sharing and workplace optimizations and things that I could never imagine. Wait a minute, so I'm going to be sitting with this Oculus and having this conference, and we're all going to be sitting next to each other. Maybe that's where we're headed, but I know for games, obviously it's big, and we're certainly looking to have our content available wherever a user wants to engage with us. And we're launching a Star Wars game later on this year on Nintendo Switch, like I mentioned, and just constantly trying to test and learn, like everybody is, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly one, and obviously the other big buzz right now is all the NFTs, right? Certainly I think that's big in the gaming world. I can't say that I don't know if we've tested an NFT yet, or if our content is has that kind of right demand for an NFT. I guess I don't know. It seems like it's a lot of athletes and celebrities and stuff like that. Is that something you guys have kicked around at all yet?
No, not at all. I don't, I can't even begin that I fully understand. I get it, but I don't get it. So, yeah,
it's Bitcoin, hey, can you pay for your subscription with Bitcoin? I'm like, I don't think so. I think that came up in one of our all hands, and somebody said, oh, can people buy coins in games and do in-app purchases through Bitcoin? And we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Exactly. I guess the big challenge, right, will be with all these new technologies and it's kind of linking it back to the kind of the second pillar of our conversation is privacy, right? I guess Bitcoin is at its core meant to be more private. it'll be interesting to see, is that something that people are more concerned about, or have you guys thought about, like, when you test and learn new things, is that something that comes up?
I'd say not it's not always top. I think it's kind of a, especially with our legal teams, something in the back. We don't want to release any sort of PII.
Okay.
But yeah, I do, like I mentioned, I do think customers kind of taking back control of their data could be a really interesting avenue, sort of empowering them and compensating them, almost like, the kind of NCAA athlete thing that we went through a couple years ago. Like, maybe it's time for that sort of conversation. And so yeah, I'm interested and excited.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, and obviously the last piece of any new kind of test and learn strategy is the measurement strategy too, and
yeah,
that seems to always be the biggest challenge, right? Is like, okay, great, let's test this, but how are we gonna measure success of this new test? How do you guys evaluate? Is there certain KPIs that maybe it's like, hey, we're testing this new voice thing. Is it social buzz? Is it brand lift? Is it, is there certain measurements that you guys put in place when you're testing new things?
yeah. I'm gonna give you the terrible answer of it depends. um, so I will say, like, I think at the heart of it, if we can answer the question, is it the right consumer or is it hitting a user at the right moment, the appetite gets a lot more versus, hey, it's a new thing, like, go do it. I think, your point, kind of always having this allocation, whether it's 1%, 5%, 20%, but you're always sort of, experimenting. And then, ultimately, what are you trying to do? I know it's kind of rudimentary and basic, but, like, if you want to drive awareness with a new, like for us, for TikTok Talk, it was, trying to drive awareness with a younger demo. So it's just like, are they watching it? And that was good enough. Again, we're not going to get sort of the sophisticated measurement, how much is it ultimately driving, but, I think it was a good leading indicator to say, hey, we hit the right audience. And then, in some of the brand tracking that we ultimately did, now that audience was aware and started to understand and consider, Paramount Plus and, Sling when we did it at Sling. So again, yeah, like, not terribly sophisticated. I think, it's hard when you don't have all the management tools like some of the more established platforms, but be okay with that, be willing to that, and maybe find other ways to sort of rationalize how this makes a lot of sense.
Right, right. All right, well, let's. Looks like there's a few questions up here. I think we kind of covered on some of these, but the first one is, has the crisis forced modifications to short-term, long-term goals, and how do you measure success? We just talked about measurement of success, but I guess, you guys launched at a pretty interesting time
Yeah.
in the world, right? So I'm assuming as you were planning, and you just came on board fairly recently. So, how do you, like, launching an all new service in the middle of a global pandemic? Now, certainly streaming, you're not talking about like a widget, right, where
Yeah.
somebody goes out and buys it. So streaming was well positioned when you launched. So, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of conversations of like, do we go now? Do we wait till later? Or how did the crisis play into your rollout plans?
Yeah. I'd be lying if I said, like, we planned it that way. We've been in different tailwinds, and I think, towards the, as time has transpired, I think, like, what you ultimately saw, or the data that we saw, was people were spending a ton of time in consuming content. And I've seen jokes of, like, there must be someone out there who's reached the end of Netflix, like, if that's even possible.
I think
And so
I've got a teenage daughter. I think she's getting close. I feel like she's getting close.
I think it was, we sort of lucked out in that sense. It was a good time. Like, people probably consumed a lot of the content that they were most familiar with, and now they were looking for other things. I think, as we added more to the platform, I really like a lot of the category stuff, and it's just like feel good TV where, there's enough stuff and bad stuff going on in the world,
Yeah.
where if people wanted to escape, like, you could go through 200 plus episodes of Ink Masters or like NCIS, where, like, you always catch the killer, and, like, it's very, like, predictable, and I think, like, safe and, like, comforting. And so, I think we were lucky in that sense. Maybe it was better to be lucky than good at that time. But It's definitely, I think as we're going to continue to lean into, as people have fatigue in other streaming services, having new, different content. You thankfully, you mentioned we have a new slate of new original content coming out too. So, so we're excited because we think like that's a tailwind for us, and that's and hopefully we can turn that into growth and additional viewership.
Yeah, and obviously, with people, we're kind of facing a similar challenge where gaming saw huge spikes.
Sure.
People locked in the house and they're like, okay, all of our games are free to play too. So that certainly helped, bring back people that are lapsed players and help new players, and all of our games are social. So, it was kind of a weird space where, you see a lot of colleagues and friends who are like, oh my God, my business is really suffering because of COVID. And the gaming business was like having this kind of like breakout shiny moment. You're like, oh my God. You almost feel bad at a point, but you got to head down and like, let's take this opportunity and run with it. Right. And
Absolutely.
and invest in the brand and build it. And for when people come out of COVID and they're like, okay,
yeah,
and so I guess that's a similar challenge, right? Is like, do we think that now that people are coming out of quarantine and things are opening up again and people are dying to get out of their house and go travel and experience things in IRL, right? I mean, the challenge now is keeping those customers that we acquired. And so I got to imagine that the retention plans, I subscribed to Paramount Plus and so now it's like, it's keeping me in, and it sounds like the new content strategy. So what are some of the new shows that you're most excited about as to keep those new customers coming in?
I'm going to embarrass myself here, and maybe a lesser known show, but Younger season 7 is coming up. My wife and I just got through binging season 1 through 6, and if you don't know, it's about a woman who steps away from her career and then comes back pretending to be like half her age, and sort of grows this career in the publishing industry. Hilary Duff's in it. So, kind of like, again, just like easy. Thank you, Sarah, for the great show. Like very easy, makes it easy to go to bed at night versus, I know a lot of people are like digging the crime drama, like serial killer. We tried to do that. There's
I'm saying I need that light entertainment. I'm like,
exactly right. Like it messes with your sleep. So
there's enough bad stuff going on in the world. I don't need to see another crime mystery show. I mean, and I saw obviously you've got a lot of leaning into the unscripted, obviously as well, right? You brought back the MTV The Challenge.
Yes.
So that's a fun show, and and obviously all the CBS stuff that's coming out too. I just saw they renewed. Oh, I can't remember what the show was, but so much content. Let me look back at the some of these questions here. We talked about kind of the media mix. We talked about innovations. One question was, how do you see media partners, especially in TV, evolving over the years, over the 21? I guess this upfront is what they're referring to.
So is media partners like other networks, or is it? I don't
know.
It
seems like they're specifically asking about TV. Obviously with ratings declining and more streaming coming on. How is TV going to continue to lean in? It's such a mass market medium and endemic for you guys, obviously.
Of course, and I think both at ViacomCBS and at Dish, I don't think it's going to be maybe a zero-sum game like some people think. I think linear TV, and you see it in Pluto too, who's done sort of gangbusters. Like people like the idea of just like turning on the TV and it's on, and like I don't have to think about it. And we sort of joke, and in some of the focus groups and research that we've done, it's people spend 20-30 minutes on Netflix looking for a show and then wind up watching just The Office all over again. And so
I turn it off and turn on the news. I can't decide.
Yeah, right. I can't do it anymore. So I think like. I know people say like linear is dying, and it's probably never going to be as big as it once was. 100 million households, but I think there's definitely spots where it's gonna go. Again, I think